The evolution of horses is often used as a prime example of evidence for evolution in action. The fossil record preserves a fascinating glimpse into how these animals evolved from small, multi-toed browsers into the big-bodied, hoofed grazers of the modern day, and the true complexities involved in the history of this incredible lineage. But the rise of horses took place on an ever-changing planet, and one of the most significant transformations that took place in this ancient world was the arrival of modern humans. Humans and horses have had a truly remarkable connection that spans thousands of years. Prehistoric humans, including other human species, were coexisting with and hunting horses for millennia, and the ancient people responsible for the breathtaking rock art found in European caves seem to have been utterly fascinated with these animals. Then, eventually, a substantial breakthrough occurred when the first horses became domesticated by ancient cultures, changing the world forever. The history of horse domestication is another incredibly complex topic that has undergone some major revisions in the past decade or so, as amazing new discoveries have been made that challenge previous ideas about this development. It's important, therefore, to keep in mind that what we currently think could change in the future as more evidence is found. Nevertheless, we're certainly closer now than ever before to truly understanding how this remarkable process happened, and in this video we'll explore all the evidence to try and piece together our current understanding of the mystery of how horse domestication happened. We'll start right where we left off in the first video, with the spreading of the living horse genus out of the New World and back into the Old World once again. As I mentioned in the last video, the genus Equus contains a number of subdivisions within it, but a very well supported one is the distinction between the cabalines and the non-cabalines. The non-cabalines comprised the ass and zebra lineages, and branched off fairly early on as they migrated into the Old World from the Americas, whereas the cabalines, or true horses, include the domesticated horses and their wild ancestors, Przewalski's horse, the tarpan, and some other extinct horses. It's these cabalines that we'll be focusing mainly on in this video, as the domestication of donkeys from wild asses is a whole other topic. Within the cabalines, it then appears that another division can be classified. A molecular study from 2005 found that various specimens of horses from the Pleistocene, historic and modern times grouped into two clades, or subgroups, one of which was widely distributed all the way from Central Europe to North America and was present both north and south of the Pleistocene ice sheets during glaciation periods, and a second which was restricted just to North America. Comparing the base pairs of a certain region of the mitochondrial genome between the groups and those of domestic horses from historic and modern times, the researchers discovered that the more widely distributed grouping was the one from which horses were domesticated, as that's the group they clustered with. The other, purely North American grouping was therefore nothing to do with the domesticating of these animals, and if it had been present in the Old World at all, it probably went extinct there long before the domestication events took place. What about the other group then? Well, it appears to have been a highly adaptable and mobile group, as there is not much of a morphological difference between these animals in one region compared to another. However, they still became extinct in the New World, as did all the other equids, lasting there until about 10,000 years ago. But they remained in Europe and Asia, and that's where our domestication story begins. Long before the domestication of these magnificent beasts began, however, humans had a very different relationship to these animals and the way they interacted with them. There are extensive records of humans hunting, scavenging, and processing horses, seemingly utilising as much of their meat and bones as possible. Potentially the oldest record of human-horse interactions in the fossil record is from a site in southern England, at a locality called Boxgrove in the county of Sussex. This site has been dated to about 500,000 years ago and is incredibly significant for a number of reasons, including preserving the oldest evidence of humans in Britain. These were not humans like us though, instead most likely belonging to the species Homo heidelbergensis. Their presence here represents one of, if not the very first, waves of temporary inhabitation of Britain by humans, and the Boxgrove site records a fascinating glimpse into what these people were getting up to while they were here. Horse bones have also been recovered from Boxgrove, and interestingly show some very clear signs of having been processed by humans. In fact, there's an entire horse butchery site here. Additionally, there's even the possibility that these horses had been hunted by these people. Cut marks, evidence of skinning, filleting, and smashing open bones are widespread among these horse, rhino, and deer remains found here, and show that however these people acquired these carcasses, they definitely got them while they were still relatively fresh and intact. Gnaw marks from non-hominid animals always overlie the marks made by the humans, showing that these don't seem to have been scavenged kills made by other animals, but instead killed by the people themselves. A key find from Boxgrove in support of this active hunting idea is a scapula from a horse at this site which displays a semicircular fracture that is remarkably consistent with a puncture wound from a projectile weapon. Lines on the sides of the wound have been interpreted as evidence of rifling, which is caused when a projectile spins as it enters the body, leading researchers to conclude that this horse had been speared. This specimen, along with the evidence of processing carcasses, therefore indicates that some of these ancient human species already had a relationship with the horses they shared their environment with, hunting these animals down and utilising them as sources of food. There's a great account in the zooarchaeologist Sandra Olsen's book Horses Through Time, describing the various sites across Europe dating to much more recently than 500,000 years ago, from which horse remains have also been recovered. There's evidence from Middle Paleolithic sites in Italy that Neanderthals had been scavenging horses, since many horse skulls have been recovered from the rock shelters inhabited by these people. Archaeologists have interpreted this high frequency of skulls as potential evidence for these Neanderthal communities preferring to scavenge kills made by carnivores rather than hunt horses themselves, as the skull might have been more difficult for a non-human animal to access, but Neanderthals were likely better suited at getting to the insides. Then, younger sites dating to 55,000 years ago and later seem to preserve more bones from the bodies of horses and other game animals, leading archaeologists to suggest that this resulted in a shift towards Neanderthals in Europe actively hunting these beasts themselves, instead of relying mainly on scavenging. Horses were of course not the only animals being hunted by people in the Middle and Upper Paleolithic, and were actually a relatively minor component of bone sites in many cases, although there are instances of horses becoming favoured in certain environmental conditions, namely colder, drier phases. Regions of Europe that featured large rivers and extensive grasslands also seem to have been supportive of large horse populations, with Paleolithic sites in the upper Danube region of southern Germany preserving a notably high frequency of horse bones among the butchered animals here. During the Upper Paleolithic, once Homo sapiens had made their way into Europe, horses continued to be targeted as game animals, with well-known localities in southern France and northern Spain preserving more evidence of these interactions. The proportions of different animals present in these kill sites seems to depend greatly on the topography of the area, with varying frequencies of horses, reindeer and saiga antelope at different localities. Olsen's book also explains how the hunting of truly wild horses was no easy feat for these ancient humans. Whereas modern horses have been selectively bred to generally favour a more docile temperament, these wild ancestral horses would have been aggressive, dangerous creatures, much like the Przewalski's horse can be today. The fact that these people were able to hunt them down on foot and using relatively simple spears just goes to show how efficient and ingenious they were at killing. Indeed, there's one particularly remarkable site in France that perfectly demonstrates this human capability of cooperation and use of tools in order to take down dangerous prey: Salutré, just west of the city of Macon. This is a major horse kill site dating mainly to the Upper Paleolithic, and records a period of hunts between 32,000 and 12,000 years ago. The most prominent feature of this locality is a huge limestone ridge towering above the landscape, and so it was understandably thought for many years that the horses killed here had been forced off the top of this ridge by ancient human hunters who utilised the sheer drop of the cliff to their advantage. Some dramatic artwork has been created of this idea, and for a long time it was generally accepted that this is what had happened at Salutré to result in these accumulations of horse bones. However, more recent investigation into the site has actually revealed a different story. Looking at the distribution of horse bones at the locality, it's clear that the accumulations don't actually occur at the base of the steep cliff to the west of the ridge, but instead on the southern slope. So the argument goes, either every single kill and piece of abandoned weaponry was being carried around to the southern side, where they are always found, or the killing and butchering was actually happening here instead. The reality of the site seems to be that the cliff face on the southern side acted as a natural corral, with the human hunters driving the horses towards this area, perhaps with the use of fire or the construction of drive lanes to funnel these animals where they wanted them. Then, when the horses were backed up against the cliff and slope of the ridge and unable to quickly get away, these people could slaughter them much more easily. Salutré was an ideal site for hunting horses not just because of the natural topography though, but also due to its position along a potential migration route for these animals. Research done on thin sections of tooth roots from horse remains found here indicate that most of the animals were killed in the warmer months of the year, leading archaeologists to propose that the valley Salutré is situated in was being crossed by herds of horses as they migrated from the Suna River floodplains where they lived during the winter to the highland region of the Massif Central, their summer habitat. Prehistoric hunters were then perhaps taking advantage of these annual migrations of herds, with the ideal location and shape of the limestone ridge being the reason that over 20,000 years of repeated horse killings are recorded in this particular locality. And it's not just in Eurasia that this sort of Pleistocene human-horse interaction has been observed. North America, too, preserves some incredible evidence of horses being preyed upon by ancient humans. In southwest Alberta, Canada, a site known as Waddy's Beach has been found to include the butchered remains of 7 individual horses, as well as an American camel, the genus Camelops. The horses found here have been referred to Equus conversidens, known by some as the so-called Mexican horse, although this species has subsequently been found to be nested within the genus Harrington hippus, the New World stilt-legged horse, which we met in the last video, which itself has since been synonymized with the genus Equus again by some workers, just in case you needed more of an illustration of how messy equid taxonomy can get sometimes. Anyway, in addition to horse and camel remains, 29 lithic artifacts, that is stone tools, were found associated with the animals, and various cut marks were observed on the bones. A cut hyoid, the bone in the neck that anchors the tongue, found at this locality is very characteristic of butchering by humans, and a large cobble was also found that was apparently used to mark the kill site. Dating of Waddy's Beach revealed that the kills were probably made 13,300 years ago, not long before horses disappeared from the Americas. So clearly, humans and horses had a very different relationship to each other during the Pleistocene than more recent times in history, with multiple different human species targeting these animals as sources of food and developing some fascinating techniques to improve their chances of successfully taking down these beasts. But there's also bits of evidence that might suggest a deeper relationship between our species, even back in the Pleistocene. Again, Olsen describes in her book how there may be evidence of horse skulls and teeth being treated with special care, with these bones being placed near hearths at sites in the Pyrenees and further north in France, possibly an indication of these elements having some kind of meaning to these people. Horse incisors too have been found with grooves around their roots and small holes that might have been created in order to allow a string to be passed through for a necklace, or perhaps for sewing onto clothing. Again, there's no way to know for sure, but it does seem to suggest a deeper level to the human-horse relationship at this time in history. Indeed, evidence from cave art indicates that Paleolithic human communities were utterly obsessed with these animals. A study published in 2019 compiled a database of more than 4,700 instances of animal depictions in rock art from across Europe, between 30,000 to 12,000 years ago, analysing the occurrence of certain organisms in these pieces of artwork. Incredibly, horses are by far the most favoured subjects of Paleolithic artwork, with almost 30% of the animals in this database being horses, and over 3/4 of all the rock art sites included in the study featuring at least one horse illustration. The analysis found that horses, along with bison, clearly dominate the depictions of animals from this period in human history. But even compared to the bison illustrations, the horses seem to have held a special place in prehistoric artwork, being more consistently featured and also being placed in particularly visible locations within the caves themselves, such as the instance of a nearly 3-meter long illustration of a horse on the ceiling of Rufinek Cave, the largest figure of an animal on this ceiling. What this apparent admiration of the horse among Paleolithic peoples truly means is obviously subject to a lot of uncertainty, but one suggestion made by the author of this 2019 study is that horses had some sort of mythical status to the ancient people of Europe, and the widespread occurrence of this many horse paintings could also be an indication of an exchange of ideas across communities in Europe. And it wasn't just rock art that horses were inspiring. Physical carvings were made of these animals too, with small sculptures such as a 30,000-year-old carved piece of mammoth ivory found in Germany, alongside ivory carvings of other animals. Additionally, surprisingly huge numbers of stone plaques with horse engravings on have been found, with a Paleolithic site in Germany preserving over 70 images of horses across more than 60 plaques, while a locality in France has yielded over 90 such carvings. Another interesting common find in French sites, and sometimes in Spain, are horse hyoid bones that have been carved at one end into the shape of a horse head. Sometimes these carved bones will be found with small holes in them, again suggesting that they were perhaps being utilised as pendants of some form. So it's quite clear that the wild horses of the Pleistocene had quite an impact on the people living at this time, being a source of food, but also of apparent admiration. These animals seem to have had some kind of cultural significance among Paleolithic communities, even long before domestication actually occurred, showing that the human fascination with these incredible animals goes back thousands and thousands of years. And that fascination eventually led to the domestication of these animals. This is, as I've already mentioned, a very complex field of research with many different hypotheses and ideas having been put forward in the past. So many different approaches have been applied in the past that it's difficult to synthesize all the data available into a simple, definitive account of how horse domestication occurred. But a very recent study from last year does seem to have hopefully solved the controversy over the details of this event, or at least brought us a whole lot closer to understanding what really happened. But before we investigate this recent research, it's important to understand that a lot of people had several different ideas in the past. We won't go into detail about them as they've largely been overturned now, but some researchers proposed that there had been one single origin of domestication in horses, while others favoured the idea that multiple domestication events had happened across different populations of wild horses. These multiple origin proponents suggested and named various subspecies that would supposedly have given rise to some of the modern day breeds, including proposing that Przewalski's horse and the tarpan, which I briefly mentioned earlier, are the surviving representatives of some of these wild ancestors. Tarpans are an extinct subspecies of horse that inhabited Europe and survived on the Russian steppe until the late 19th century, but their taxonomy and relationships to other horses have been a bit convoluted in the past. Despite some older works suggesting that they might be a potential ancestor of certain domestic horses, more recent studies have found that the tarpan most likely doesn't have anything to do with the ancestry of domestic horses. Instead, they seem to have originated from the interbreeding of now extinct native European horses and populations of domestic horses closely related to the group that all living domestic horses descend from. Przewalski's horses were for a time considered a more promising potential representative of the wild ancestor. These wild horses of Mongolia were first recorded in 1880 and were quickly hunted to extinction in the wild in fewer than 100 years, with the last confirmed sighting occurring in 1969. Fortunately, they survived as captive populations in zoos, and a successful reintroduction program starting in the 90s has resulted in these animals returning to their original habitat. All living Przewalski's horses are the descendants of a very small number of individuals that were held captive and bred in zoos, however, meaning that analyses of their genetics might be influenced sometimes due to this severe bottleneck. One of the most notable differences between Przewalski's horses and domestic horses is the fact that Przewalski's have a total of 66 chromosomes, whereas modern domestic breeds always possess 64. This does not limit crossbreeding between these lineages, however, but the 66 chromosome count is considered to be the basal or primitive condition. Once genetic studies started to be done on the Przewalski's horse though, there were some clear indications that these animals could not be the direct ancestral population from which horses were domesticated. Various studies found that the lineage leading to domestic horses had diverged from Przewalski's horses long before domestication could possibly have occurred. These dates do vary somewhat, but all of them are placed to before the earliest evidence of domestic horses. So then, are Przewalski's horses the last truly wild horses left on the planet? It's important to note here that there's a key distinction between wild and feral. While certain populations of free-roaming horses are referred to as wild, such as the American Mustang or the Brumby in Australia, these should technically be referred to as feral since they descend from a domesticated ancestor. But if Przewalski's horses were never domesticated at any point in the past, then they can be considered truly wild horses. However, that's where there's some more disagreements between different studies and researchers. To understand this controversy though, we first need to investigate what can be considered the earliest evidence of a culture domesticating horses, the Botai culture. The Botai culture, which existed from 3700 to 3100 BCE, were a people who inhabited Central Asia, with important sites being found in modern-day Kazakhstan. Dating back to the Copper Age, there's some astonishing evidence of what could potentially be the oldest known occurrence of horse domestication in this culture, as revealed when researchers examined the evidence from more than 300,000 fragments of horse bones associated with the Botai site. The metacarpals, bones of the front feet, of these Botai horses were shown to be much more similar to later domesticated Bronze Age horses than the older wild horses of the Paleolithic from this region. Additionally, there was evidence in the jaws and teeth of characteristic bone and enamel damage caused by the use of bridles or bits. And, incredibly, there was also evidence of milk from mares and parts of horse bodies having been processed in ceramics, suggesting that these people were milking these animals as well as utilising their carcasses after death. Then there's also evidence of layers of horse dung being present in unused house pits in Botai sites that seem to suggest that these people were collecting and disposing of horse droppings in designated areas, indicating that these animals might have been kept in confined pens. A potential corral was also identified at one site that had phosphorus-enriched soils inside the perimeter compared to the soils outside, interpreted as possibly resulting from horse manure building up inside this area. So some pretty good evidence of the oldest occurrence of apparently domesticated horses, as well as the possibility of the earliest evidence of horse riding by humans at this time 5,500 years ago. This is an absolutely incredible discovery, and provides us with some much needed information about how people might have first domesticated these remarkable animals. So what does this have to do with Przewalski's horse? Well, a study published in 2018 that looked at the genomes of over 100 horses representing both modern and ancient individuals, including 20 horses from Botai, made the unexpected discovery that Przewalski's horses are in fact the feral descendants of the horses that were herded at the Botai site. In this case, Przewalski's horses are actually not truly wild horses, since they had been domesticated in the past by the people of Botai. In addition, the study revealed that all domestic horses from the last 4,000 years only had about 2.7% of a related ancestry to the Botai horses, meaning that the animals kept by this Copper Age culture were not in fact the ancestors of today's domestic breeds. But then, just to make things more confusing, another study published in 2021 presented evidence arguing against domestication having occurred at Botai at all. These researchers, working with a new revelation that these horses were Przewalski's, countered the original points put forward in favour of the Botai horses representing domestic individuals by arguing that the supposed bridle damage to the jaws and teeth are instead consistent with natural wear. Additionally, they argue that instead of the accumulations of horse bones being from generations of herding, they actually originate from regular mass harvesting of wild Przewalski's horses, as indicated by bone arrowheads found associated with certain specimens. This would then mean that the Przewalski's horses can again be considered a truly wild lineage, and that the first instance of horse domestication must have occurred somewhere else. Whether or not the Botai horses do represent domesticated individuals or not, one thing that has become clear is that these animals are not the ancestors of modern domestic breeds. Even if domestication did take place here, the genetic evidence shows that it was a restricted occurrence and that the horses involved were never spread very far outside of their native ranges. This means that in order to understand the origin of modern domesticated horses, we have to look elsewhere in the world. And a very recent paper from October of 2021 has done just that, seemingly, or at least hopefully, at last identifying where the domestication event that led to all modern breeds first occurred. Although a couple of other locations had been suggested as potential centres of origin for this event, namely the peninsulas of Iberia and Anatolia, recent studies have produced evidence against favouring these sites. Instead, this 2021 paper finds that the most compelling evidence points towards the Western Eurasian steppes as the site of domestication. In particular, the lower Volga Don region, indicated by the dashed red line here, seems to be the most likely point of origin for domesticated horses. This comprehensive analysis of 273 horse genomes dating from 50,000 to 2,000 years BCE found that starting around 2,200 years BCE, the ancestors of modern domestic horses, referred to as the Dom2 lineage, spread out of this region. The horses that gave rise to the Dom2 genetic lineage potentially came from populations kept by the late Copper Age to early Bronze Age Yamnaya culture, with the genomes of some of these horses showing more genetic affinity with the Dom2 lineage when compared with more ancient wild horses. The spread of the Yamnaya culture people has also been the subject of several previous studies, with genetic evidence showing that these people of the Western Eurasian steppes underwent a massive expansion into Eastern and Central Europe between 2900 and 2300 BCE, which subsequently also drove the spread of the Indo-European language family. This spread had been linked by some researchers to the Yamnaya use of domestic horses, and specifically horseback riding, enabling this dispersal of people and languages into Europe. However, the 2021 study refutes this claim, since the genetic evidence shows that the massive spread of domestic horses from their Western Eurasian steppe homeland didn't occur until much later on. Instead, the Yamnaya culture horse pastoralism was a relatively localized occurrence, similar to what may have occurred with the Botai, and did not result in the spread of the Dom2 lineage. Therefore, something else must have driven the human expansion. The spread of the Dom2 domesticated horses from their homelands truly began about 2200 BCE, according to the study. From this point in time onwards, the Dom2 lineage expands far beyond their original range, replacing almost all other local populations in Eurasia by 1500 to 1000 BCE, as the genetic profile becomes the dominant one within just a few centuries. It's pretty clear that this huge spread of one particular genetic lineage must be due to human activity, and the study presents more evidence that confirms this. At the same time that the horses were spreading across Asia, so too was the Indo-Iranian language family, as well as the new technology of chariots. The significance of these languages spreading comes from the fact that there is a great deal of lexical evidence for domestication, horse-drawn chariots, and subsequent related mythologies in the Indo-Iranian language branch, so its expansion across Asia occurring simultaneously with the Dom2 lineage suggests a connection there. The earliest speakers of these languages are also associated with populations that directly preceded the Sintashta culture, a Middle Bronze Age culture in the northern Eurasian steppe that includes the first known people to use chariots. In fact, spoke-wheeled chariots had been found alongside horses in Sintashta burial mounds, but represent a later advancement in horse technology, with the earliest domesticated animals presumably having been ridden first. The study therefore suggests that the combined spread of this genetic lineage, these languages that reference horse domestication, and chariotry, can be explained by humans domesticating them and then quickly breeding huge numbers of this particular lineage as demand suddenly increased. The spread and utilization of these animals completely revolutionized travel as well as warfare, and through the intervention of humans, the Dom2 horses quickly replaced the majority of other lineages. Looking at the genetics of the Dom2 lineage, two very notable and interesting changes were detected. By examining what kinds of genetic variants were present at significant abundances in their sample of horses, the paper describes how genes that are linked to more resilience to stresses inflicted on the back, as well as more docile behaviour, seem to have been selected for in the Dom2 horses, suggesting that humans were breeding horses that were easier to control and could bear more weight on their backs, exactly what would be needed for horseback riding. It's no exaggeration to state that the domestication of wild horses by humans fundamentally changed history. Horses influenced societies in ways that no other animal had before, with this new method of fast transport over great distances uniting people across vast areas of land, as well as revolutionizing how many cultures waged wars. The absolutely explosive increase in the population of the Dom2 horses just shows how valuable these animals became to our species and how significant they are to the development of our modern world. The domestication of the horse, then, is a complex story with many researchers still working to try and discover exactly how it happened. Hopefully, this video has given you a good overview of our current understanding though, but as with any still developing field of study, I'm sure future work will eventually overturn some of the ideas presented here. Nevertheless, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video and learned something new. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters too, especially our Dinosaur tier supporters Amanda von Nordek, Archianthus, Brent Furman, Clara Middleton, Dhruv Shrivastava, George Vojtek, Just F Max, Corey Peterson, Loxy Poo, Mike Pace, Nicole Bueno, Persian Boy, Robert Thomas, and Steve Bradshaw. If you would like to find out more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you think we deserve it, and if you would like to see more from us.